Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the small blue planet turn slowly below. His 4 eyes studied the surface through the viewing screen. Green and brown patches covered the land. White clouds drifted across blue oceans. It looked like any other world with life. But this world was different. This world had thinking creatures on it. The Admiral's skin changed from blue to purple, showing his excitement. In 3,000 years, the Hegemony Empire had found millions of worlds. Most were empty rocks or gas balls. Some had simple plants or animals. Very few had creatures that could think and build things. Those thinking creatures always made the same choice when they met the Empire. They surrendered. "Report," Admiral said to his science officer. Lieutenant OK looked at his instruments. His tentacles moved quickly over the controls. "The planet has about 8 billion thinking creatures, Admiral. They call themselves humans. They call their world Earth or Terra." "What is their technology level?" "Very primitive, sir. They use chemical rockets to leave their planet. Their power comes from splitting atoms and burning dead plants. They send messages using simple electromagnetic waves." Admiral made a sound that was like laughter in his species. "Chemical rockets? How do they expect to fight ships that travel between stars?" "They do not, sir. Our arrival seems to have caused great fear among them. Their military forces are gathering, but their weapons are laughable. They shoot small metal pieces and create tiny explosions." The Admiral looked at the 12 massive ships that floated near his flagship. Each ship was 3 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to turn a moon into dust. His fleet had conquered 500 worlds. No species had ever lasted more than 1 day against such power. "Send the standard annexation declaration," he ordered. The message went out in 17 different human languages. It was the same message the Empire sent to every new species they found. The words were simple and clear. "Greetings, inhabitants of the 3rd planet of this star system. You have been discovered by the Hegemony Empire, rightful rulers of this galaxy. Your world and your species will now become part of our great civilization. You have 72 hours to surrender all military forces and government control to Imperial authority. Resistance will result in total destruction. Submit now and live as servants of the Empire. Refuse and die." Admiral expected the usual response. Sometimes the new species tried to fight right away and were destroyed quickly. Sometimes they begged for mercy and were allowed to live as slaves. Sometimes they tried to negotiate and were told that surrender was the only option. Humans were different. 6 hours passed, then 12, then 24. The Admiral began to feel annoyed. His skin turned from purple to red. "Have they responded yet?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Lieutenant OK said. His voice sounded confused. "But their response is strange." "Show me." The main screen filled with the image of an elderly human female. She sat behind a large desk in a room filled with other humans. Her hair was gray and her face was lined with age, but her eyes were sharp and clear. "I am President Sarah of the United Earth Defense Council," the human said. "We have received your message and discussed it thoroughly with the leaders of all Earth nations." Admiral leaned forward. This was the part where they always begged or tried to bargain. "Our answer is simple," President continued. "We decline your offer." The Admiral's 4 eyes widened. In 3,000 years, no species had ever said those words. "Furthermore," the human continued, "we formally request that you remove your ships from our star system. You are not welcome here. We wish to continue developing as an independent species without interference from your empire." The transmission ended. The bridge fell silent. Lieutenant Ok's tentacles trembled. "Admiral, I believe there was a translation error. No species would refuse the Empire's generous offer to join our civilization." "Check the translation again." The lieutenant worked quickly. After several minutes, he looked up with all 6 of his eyes wide with shock. "The translation is correct, sir. They refused us. They told us to leave." Admiral's skin cycled through several colors as he tried to control his emotions. Anger, confusion, and amazement all fought in his mind. Have they gone insane? Do they not understand what will happen to them? "Perhaps their primitive minds cannot grasp the power of the Empire," suggested the lieutenant. "Then we will show them." The Admiral turned to his weapons officer. "Target 3 of the large asteroids in this system. Use kinetic bombardment. Show these humans what Imperial might can do." "Yes, Admiral." 3 asteroids, each the size of a small mountain, were turned to dust in seconds. The explosions lit up space like tiny new suns. The display of power was beautiful and terrible. Admiral sent another message to Earth. You have seen what our weapons can do to solid rock. Your cities would fare much worse. You have 24 hours to reconsider your foolish decision. The response came back in just 6 hours. It was the same human female president, but this time she was not alone. Behind her stood dozens of other humans in military uniforms. They all looked calm and determined. Admiral of the Hegemony Empire, President began. We saw your demonstration of force. We are not impressed. You destroyed 3 empty rocks floating in space. We destroy things much larger when we need to. The Admiral felt his blood grow cold. You have violated our territorial sovereignty by entering our star system without permission and threatening our world, the President continued. We demand that you remove your vessels from the Sol system immediately. She paused and looked directly into the camera. When she spoke again, her voice was like ice. This is your only warning. Leave now or face the consequences. The transmission ended. Admiral stared at the blank screen for a long time. In 3,000 years of imperial expansion, no one had ever warned the Empire about anything. Species begged, pleaded, surrendered, or died fighting hopeless battles. But they never issued warnings to the most powerful force in the galaxy. Something was very wrong with these humans. Admiral could not sleep. He walked the corridors of his flagship, thinking about the strange humans and their impossible warning. No species in the galaxy's history had ever told the Hegemony Empire what to do. The idea was so crazy that it made his head hurt. Admiral, Lieutenant OK found him in the observation deck. The humans have sent another message. Skin turned orange with irritation. What do they want now? To surrender properly this time? No, sir, they are giving us instructions. The Admiral rushed to the bridge. The main screen showed President again. This time she looked tired, as if she had not slept either. Admiral, she began, 24 hours have passed since we asked you to leave our system. You are still here. This is disappointing but not surprising. Bullies rarely listen to reasonable requests. The Admiral's hands clenched into fists. No one had ever called the Empire bullies. We know your species believes that might makes right, President continued. You think that because you have big ships and powerful weapons, you can take whatever you want. You think smaller, weaker species exist only to serve you. She leaned forward in her chair. You are wronged. The President stood up and walked to a large window behind her desk. Through the glass, the Admiral could see the blue and green surface of Earth far below. This is our world, she said quietly. Our people have lived here for thousands of years. We have built cities and art and music. We have loved and laughed and cried. We have dreamed of reaching the stars and meeting other thinking beings in peace and friendship. She turned back to face the camera. Instead, we meet you. An empire that takes what it wants and destroys what it cannot use. An empire that turns free beings into slaves and calls it civilization. The Admiral felt something strange in his chest. Was it guilt? Impossible. The Empire brought order to the galaxy. They brought peace through strength. You have 48 hours to leave our system, President said. After that time, we will consider your presence an act of war and respond accordingly. The transmission ended. Lieutenant OK looked at his Admiral with all 6 eyes wide. Sir, they are threatening us. A species with chemical rockets is threatening the Hegemony Empire. I know, Admiral's voice was very quiet. What are your orders, sir? The Admiral thought for a long moment. These humans confused him. They acted like they had power when they clearly did not. Maybe they were simply insane. Maybe their brains did not work properly. Send a message to Imperial Command. Tell them we need reinforcements. Sir, for one primitive planet. These humans are unusual. I want to be sure we can handle whatever they try to do. How many ships should we request? All of them. Lieutenant Ok's tentacles went limp with shock. Sir, all of them, the entire war fleet. Yes, something about these humans makes me nervous. I have conquered 500 worlds, Lieutenant. I have never felt nervous before. 3 days later, space around Earth filled with Imperial ships. 200 massive war vessels appeared from hyperspace. Each ship carried enough weapons to destroy a city. Together, they could crack the surface of a planet. 50,000 fighter craft swarmed around the capital ships like angry insects. Their pilots were the best in the Empire, veterans of 100 battles against rebellious species. Admiral stood on his bridge and felt proud. No force in the galaxy could stand against such power. The humans would see this fleet and finally understand the futility of resistance. "Send the message," he ordered. This time he appeared on the screen himself. His 4 eyes glared down at the human leaders with supreme confidence. "People of Earth," he began, "you see the might of the hegemony empire arrayed before your world. 200 capital ships, 50,000 fighters, enough firepower to turn your planet into molten rock." He paused for effect. "You have insulted the empire with your arrogance and threats. No species speaks to us as you have spoken. For this insult, your leaders will be executed and your population enslaved. However, the empire is merciful. Surrender now and only half your leaders will die." The admiral smiled with all 4 of his mouths. "You have 1 hour to respond. After that, we begin bombardment." The hour passed slowly. Admiral expected the humans to break down and beg for mercy. He expected them to offer anything to save their world. Instead, President appeared on the screen one final time. She looked older than before and sadder, but she did not look afraid. "Admiral," she said softly, "we received your ultimatum. We have considered it carefully." Behind her, the admiral could see the same human officials as before. They all looked calm and ready. "Our answer remains the same. We refuse." The admiral felt his world shift. "Impossible. You see our fleet, you see our power. How can you still refuse?" President smiled sadly. "Because, Admiral, you have made one very serious mistake." "What mistake?" "You assume that what you see is all there is to see." The transmission ended. Admiral stared at the blank screen. Something cold moved in his stomach. What did she mean by that? "I do not know, sir," Lieutenant OK said. "But our sensors show no change in human military positions. They have a few hundred ships in orbit, but they are tiny compared to our vessels." "Scan the system again. Look for anything unusual." "We have scanned 17 times, sir. There is nothing here but the human fleet and some asteroid mining operations." Admiral nodded slowly. The humans were bluffing. They had to be. No species could hide a fleet large enough to challenge the Empire. "Prepare for orbital bombardment," he ordered. "Target their capital cities first. Show them the price of defying the Empire." "Yes, Admiral." The massive guns of 200 warships turned toward the blue and green world below. In moments, the surface would burn, and the humans would learn the true meaning of power. But as the admiral watched his weapons charge, something impossible happened. Space began to shimmer. The space around Earth began to ripple like water. Admiral blinked all 4 eyes, certain his vision was failing. But the effect grew stronger. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist in impossible ways. "Lieutenant, what is happening to our sensors?" he demanded. Lieutenant Ok's tentacles danced frantically over his controls. "Sir, our instruments are showing readings that cannot be correct. According to these displays, there are ships appearing where empty space was moments before." "Impossible. Our sensors can detect a grain of sand from 1,000 kilometers away." "I know, sir, but look at the main screen." Admiral looked and felt his blood turn to ice. Ships were appearing in space around Earth. Not small human vessels with chemical rockets, but massive constructs that understanding. They materialized from nothingness like ghosts becoming solid. The human ships were unlike anything in the Empire's databases. They looked grown rather than built, with smooth curves that pulsed with veins of blue light. Some were shaped like enormous flowers with petals that opened and closed slowly. Others resembled sea creatures with tentacles that moved through space as if swimming in an invisible ocean. "How many?" Admiral whispered. Lieutenant OK counted frantically. 3,000 vessels, sir. Each one is larger than our biggest dreadnoughts." 3,000 ships. The Admiral felt dizzy. The entire Imperial fleet contained only 8,000 capital ships spread across the galaxy. These humans had hidden a force that could challenge the Empire itself. "Where did they come from?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. They simply appeared, as if they were always there but invisible." Admiral stared at the impossible fleet that surrounded his forces. The human ships moved with fluid grace, positioning themselves between the Imperial fleet and Earth. They made no threatening moves, but their very presence was a threat beyond anything the Admiral had ever faced. "Incoming transmission from Earth," the communications officer reported. President appeared on the screen again, but now she stood in what looked like the command center of one of the strange human ships. Behind her, the Admiral could see other humans working at controls that seemed to respond to touch and thought rather than physical manipulation. "Admiral," President said calmly, "you seem surprised. Did you truly believe that a species capable of interstellar travel would be limited to chemical rockets?" The Admiral found his voice. "Your ships, where did they come from? Our sensors detected nothing." "Your sensors detected exactly what we wanted them to detect. We have been watching your empire for centuries, Admiral. We know your technology, we know your tactics, we know your weaknesses." "Centuries? That is impossible. We only discovered your system 3 days ago." President smiled. "No, Admiral, we discovered you long before you found us. When your empire was conquering its first worlds, human explorers were already walking among your people. We have been to your capital worlds. We have studied in your universities. We have worked in your factories." The Admiral felt sick. You have spies throughout the empire." "Not spies, observers. We wanted to understand what kind of beings we were sharing the galaxy with. What we learned disappointed us greatly." She turned and gestured to something off-screen. The view on the Admiral's display changed to show the space around Earth from a different angle. The Imperial fleet looked tiny and primitive compared to the human vessels that surrounded them. "You rule through fear and violence," President continued. "You take what belongs to others and call it conquest. You enslave free beings and call it civilization. You destroy what you cannot control and call it peace." "We bring order to the galaxy," Admiral protested. "Without the Empire, there would be chaos. Without the Empire, there would be freedom." The Admiral's weapons officer called out urgently. "Sir, the human ships are powering up some kind of energy systems, but I cannot identify the technology." "Are they targeting us?" I cannot tell, sir. Their technology is beyond our understanding." Admiral made a decision born of desperation and pride. "All ships, open fire, destroy the human fleet." 200 Imperial warships fired at once. The space between the fleets lit up with beams of plasma and streams of antimatter. Enough destructive power to vaporize a moon struck the human vessels. And nothing happened. The energy beams hit the strange human ships and simply disappeared. The antimatter torpedoes struck hull surfaces and were absorbed like water soaking into sand. The pulse of blue light that ran through the organic-looking vessels grew brighter, as if they were feeding on the Imperial weapons. "Report," the Admiral screamed. "Sir, our weapons had no effect. The human ships absorbed all our firepower. Their energy readings are actually increasing." Admiral watched in horror as the human fleet began to respond. But they did not fire weapons as he understood them. Instead, reality around the Imperial ships began to change. Some ships found their gravity systems revering, causing everything inside to float toward the ceiling. Others discovered that their hull armor was simply phasing out of existence, molecule by molecule. Several vessels were surrounded by fields that made them exist in slow motion, their crews moving like they were trapped in thick liquid. The most terrifying fate befell the heavy cruiser Dominant. It simply disappeared from normal space, trapped in what seemed to be a bubble universe where only that one ship existed. In 10 minutes, 80% of the Imperial fleet was disabled. Not destroyed, disabled. Every ship was still intact. Every crew member was still alive, but none of the vessels could fight, move, or escape. Admiral's flagship was one of the few still operational. He stared at his ruined fleet and felt something he had never experienced in 3,000 years of conquest: complete defeat. A new transmission arrived from President. "Admiral," she said quietly, "we warned you. We asked you to leave peacefully. You chose violence instead." "What are you?" he whispered. "We are human. We are the children of Earth, and we are very tired of watching your empire hurt innocent beings." She gestured again, and the view changed to show Imperial ships throughout the galaxy. Hundreds of them, all experiencing the same impossible fate as the Admiral's fleet. Human vessels appeared from nowhere, using technology that made Imperial science look like stone tools. Your empire has grown fat and lazy on easy conquests, President continued. You attack species that cannot defend themselves and call yourselves mighty warriors. Today you learn the difference between conquering the weak and facing the strong. What do you want? Admiral asked desperately. We want you to leave our territory and never return. We want you to stop enslaving free species. We want you to learn that the galaxy is big enough for everyone to live in peace. And if we refuse? President looked directly into his eyes through the screen. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 3,000 ships and technology beyond imperial comprehension. Then we will teach you. Emperor Os sat on his crystal throne and felt the walls of his palace shake, not from earthquakes or bombs, but from his own rage. His massive body trembled as he read the reports from Admiral's fleet. Defeated, humiliated, made helpless by a species that should have been crawling in the dirt before imperial might. Impossible, he growled, his voice echoing through the throne room. 3,000 years of conquest, 10,000 species under our rule. No one has ever defeated the Empire. His chief advisor general stood nearby with his head bowed low. My Emperor, the reports are confirmed. The humans possess technology far beyond our understanding. Their ships appear and disappear at will. Our weapons cannot harm them. Then we use different weapons. The Emperor stood from his throne. At 4 meters tall with 6 arms and skin like black armor, he was a terrifying sight when angry. His species had ruled the Empire for 2,000 years through strength and fear. Summon the Science Council, he ordered. I want every secret weapon we have ever built. I want technologies we have never used. I want power that can burn stars from the sky. My Emperor, General said carefully, perhaps we should consider negotiation with the humans. Their terms were not unreasonable. Emperor Os moved faster than something his size should have been able to move. One massive hand closed around the general's throat and lifted him off the ground. Did you just suggest that the hegemony empire should negotiate with primitives? His voice was deadly quiet. No, my Emperor, I only meant. I know what you meant. The Emperor threw the general across the room like a broken toy. Anyone else who suggests surrender will join him in the medical wing. The Science Council arrived within an hour. 5 ancient beings from different species, all united by their loyalty to the Empire and their knowledge of destruction. They had built the weapons that conquered the galaxy. My Emperor, the lead scientist spoke with a voice like grinding metal. We have reviewed the reports from the Sol system. The humans appear to possess technology that manipulates space and time itself. I do not care how their technology works. I want it destroyed. I want their world destroyed. I want them to serve as an example to any species that thinks it can defy the Empire. We understand, my Emperor, but conventional weapons will not work against them. Then use unconventional weapons. The scientists looked at each other nervously. Finally, the leader spoke again. There is one option, my Emperor, the Star-Render Array. Emperor Os smiled with all 3 of his mouths. The Star-Render Array was the Empire's greatest secret. A space station the size of a small moon built in the deepest parts of Imperial space. It had taken 500 years to construct and had never been used. Because it was designed to kill stars. Yes, the Emperor whispered. Send the array to the Sol system. If we cannot conquer the humans, we will remove them from existence entirely. My Emperor, using the array, will also destroy all the planets in that system, including any resources we might have gained. I do not care about resources anymore. I care about making sure every species in the galaxy knows what happens when you say no to the Empire. The Star-Render Array began its journey toward Earth surrounded by the largest fleet in Imperial history. 2,000 ships carried the Empire's most elite warriors and most advanced weapons. If the array failed somehow, the fleet would finish what it started. Emperor Os watched the reports and felt satisfaction return to his hearts. No species could stand against the power to destroy their sun. The humans would surrender, or they would die along with their star. But 3 days into the journey, something impossible happened. Every communication device in the Empire activated at once. Every screen, every speaker, every holographic projector suddenly showed the same image. President Terra of Earth, standing in what looked like a vast chamber filled with stars. People of the galaxy, she began, her voice somehow reaching every corner of Imperial space simultaneously. "I am President of the United Earth Defense Council. I speak to you from Terra, the third planet of the Sol system." Emperor Os screamed orders at his technicians, but nothing they tried could stop the transmission. Every attempt to block it failed. The human's message continued uninterrupted. "For 3,000 years, you have lived under the rule of the Hegemony Empire. You have been told that this rule brings peace and order to the galaxy. You have been told that without the Empire, there would be chaos and war." The image changed to show scenes from across Imperial space. Conquered worlds where alien species worked in mines and factories. Prison camps where rebels disappeared. Burned cities where populations had resisted too long. "This is the Empire's idea of peace," President continued. "Slavery disguised as civilization, fear disguised as order, theft disguised as progress." The Emperor's rage grew beyond all control. He began smashing furniture and screaming threats that no one could hear over the human transmission. "We are the children of Terra," President said. "We have watched your empire spread across the galaxy like a disease, destroying the freedom of countless species. We have remained hidden, studying your methods and preparing for the day when we could no longer stand by and watch." The view changed again. Now it showed space around Earth, where the disabled Imperial fleet floated helplessly among the strange human ships. "That day has come. The Empire has crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. They have threatened our with destruction. They have sent their ultimate weapon to murder our star and everyone who lives in our system." The image shifted one final time, showing a massive space station surrounded by 2,000 Imperial ships. The Starrender Array, humanity's death sentence, traveling toward Earth. "Your array will not reach our system," President said calmly. "Your fleets will not return to Imperial space. Consider this a demonstration of why Terra and all Terran territory are now forbidden to your empire." The transmission showed something that made Emperor Os fall back into his throne in shock. The Starrender Array, his ultimate weapon, his guarantee of victory, simply disappeared, not destroyed by explosions or torn apart by weapons. It was there one moment and gone the next, as if it had never existed. The 2,000 ships that had escorted it found themselves floating in empty space at the very edge of Imperial territory. Their weapons were gone. Their faster-than-light drives were dead. They were harmless and stranded. "Citizens of the Empire," President said, looking directly into the camera as if she could see into the Emperor's very soul. "The age of conquest is over. The age of freedom has begun. To any world seeking independence from Imperial rule, Terra stands ready to assist you." The transmission ended. Every screen in the Empire went dark. Emperor Os sat in his throne room, which had fallen completely silent. His ultimate weapon was gone. His greatest fleet was neutralized. His authority was challenged in front of every being in the Empire. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Hegemony Empire had met a force it could not conquer. And that force had just declared war on everything the Empire represented. The silence in Emperor Os's throne room lasted exactly 1 hour. Then the reports began flooding in from across the Empire, and each one brought news more impossible than the last. "My Emperor," a trembling communications officer announced, "we are receiving messages from Imperial Command on Prime. They report that unknown vessels have appeared around the orbital defense platforms." "How many vessels?" the Emperor demanded. "One, my Emperor. A single ship has disabled their entire defensive grid." Before the Emperor could respond, another officer called out. "My Emperor, Admiral reports the same situation at the shipyards. One human ship has somehow made 50 of our dreadnoughts stop working." "Stop working?" "They float in space like dead metal, my Emperor. All systems functional, but none of them respond to commands." The reports kept coming. From every major Imperial base, every strategic installation, every critical facility across 10,000 star systems. Human ships had appeared as if from nowhere and neutralized Imperial military might without firing a shot. Emperor Os realized with growing horror that the humans had been telling the truth. They had been watching the Empire for centuries. They had been everywhere, seeing everything, preparing for this moment. "My Emperor," General limped back into the throne room, his arm in a medical brace. "We have received a direct communication from Earth, for you personally." The Emperor wanted to refuse, but he had no choice. His empire was crumbling around him, made helpless by beings he had dismissed as primitives. President appeared on the main screen. She stood in the same star-filled chamber as before, but now the Emperor could see that she was not alone. Behind her stood representatives of dozens of species, aliens the Emperor recognized as subjects of his empire. Emperor Os, President said formally, I believe you are beginning to understand your situation. What have you done to my fleets? He snarled. We have removed their ability to harm others. Every Imperial warship in the galaxy has been temporarily disabled. Your weapons do not work. Your shields are down. Your communications are monitored. This is impossible. You are one small world against an empire of 10,000 systems. You still do not understand. President gestured to the beings standing behind her. We are not alone, and we never were. Meet the representatives of the Free Worlds Alliance. The camera pulled back to show the full scope of the chamber. Thousands of beings from hundreds of different species filled the space. All of them were species the Empire had conquered and ruled. For centuries, we have been quietly making contact with oppressed peoples throughout your empire, President explained. We have offered friendship, technology, and hope to those who had forgotten what freedom felt like. A tall, blue-skinned being stepped forward. The Emperor recognized him immediately, Prince of Andros 7, supposedly a loyal Imperial governor. Hello, Os, Prince said with a smile that showed sharp teeth. Surprised to see me. For 50 years, I have served the Empire publicly while working with Terra privately. My people remember what it was like before you came to our world. Another being stepped forward, a crystalline creature from the Sigma Draconis system. My world has been feeding false resource reports to the Empire for decades, she sang in a voice like breaking glass. The materials you thought you were stealing from us went instead to building human ships. One by one, dozens of Imperial subjects revealed themselves as members of the Resistance, governors who had secretly protected their people, scientists who had shared technology with Terra, merchants who had carried messages between worlds. The Emperor felt his 6 hearts stop beating. The entire Empire infiltrated. Not infiltrated, President corrected. Liberated. We offered people a choice, Os, serve an empire that treats them as slaves or join an alliance that treats them as equals. Most chose freedom. The view changed to show space battles occurring across the galaxy, but these were not the brutal conquests the Empire was known for. Imperial ships found themselves surrounded by vessels from their own subject worlds. Rebellions were erupting on 1,000 planets simultaneously. Your reign of terror is over, President announced. By right of superior force and moral authority, we declare the Sol system and all territory within 500 light-years to be the Terran exclusion zone. No Imperial vessel, no Imperial citizen, no Imperial influence is permitted within these boundaries. The Emperor tried to speak, but his voice failed him. To the remaining loyal forces of the Empire, President continued, you have a choice. Continue fighting for a government that rules through fear or lay down your weapons and help build something better. We are not interested in revenge. We want justice. A new voice spoke from behind the camera. Admiral stepped into view, but he was no longer wearing an Imperial uniform. Instead, he wore simple clothes and looked more peaceful than the Emperor had ever seen him. My Emperor, the Admiral said formally, I have seen what these humans are capable of. I have also seen what they choose not to do. They could have destroyed our fleets, but they saved every life. They could have conquered the Empire, but they offer partnership instead. Traitor, the Emperor whispered. No, Admiral replied sadly. For the first time in my life, I am truly loyal to the idea that beings can live together without one species ruling over all others. President stepped forward again. Emperor Os, you have one final choice to make. You can accept that the age of empire is over and work with us to transition to a more peaceful galaxy. Or you can continue to fight and watch as every world under your control chooses freedom over slavery. And if I refuse, he managed to ask, then you will rule over empty palaces and silent ships, because every being capable of choosing will choose to leave. The transmission showed him the truth. Across the Empire, on world after world, Imperial facilities stood empty. Not destroyed, not conquered, simply abandoned. The beings who had worked in them, lived in them, served in them had all walked away. Without subjects, An empire was just empty buildings and powerless ships. The galaxy is changing, Os, President said gently. You can change with it or be left behind, but you cannot stop it. The screen went dark. Emperor Os sat alone in his throne room for a very long time. Through the great windows, he could see his capital city. For the first time in memory, there were no crowds of subject beings hurrying through the streets on imperial business. No ships landing with tribute from conquered worlds. No parades of imperial might. Just empty spaces where an empire used to be. A single communication request blinked on his personal screen. The message was simple. We are waiting for your decision. There is still time to choose peace. Terra. The Emperor looked at his empty throne room, thought about his empty fleets and his empty worlds, and realized that the humans had been right about everything. The age of conquest was truly over. The age of freedom had begun. And for the first time in 3,000 years, every being in the galaxy had the right to choose their own future. Even him,